إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد بعدد كل داء ودواء وبارك وسلم عليه وعليهم كثيرا.
Alright, cool, let's start. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Surah al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah rabbil alameen ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. Hello everybody and welcome back to another class of Seerah. I hope we're all well rested. We had a 2 weeks hiatus where I was traveling. 1 week I was in Samarkand and the other week I was in Bukhara. Absolutely amazing experience. I highly recommend everybody go there to see Central Asian Islamic history and beautiful monuments and everything. Really well worth it, and it's very cheap as well. Today's lesson, we're going to carry on from where we were last lesson, and it seems like it's going to flow, but then there's going to be a slight detour next week, going on for probably 2 lessons before we go back to this flow. You'll see why. And each lesson from now on will only be 1 hour, which takes the pressure off everybody, because many people probably have things to do, and sometimes you're stuck with me for 4 or 5 hours, and you may feel like you may not want to join class. So in order to stop that, I've capped it at about an hour and a half max from now on. Hour, inshallah. Most of the hard work's been done anyway, so it's all easy riding from now, except for where I need to prove some parts of Meccan trade, which we shall look at. So let's have a look at pre-Islamic Mecca. So we've covered everything, but we never had a real look at Mecca. So pre-Islamic Mecca is problematic to prove because it doesn't exist on any map, any primary source map, be that the Romans or the Greeks or anybody else. Pre-Islamic Arabia doesn't exist. But we believe it. We believe it because it's mentioned in the Quran, and this is the starting point, the base of our Islamic history, the city of Mecca. Even before Medina, it's the city of Mecca. So let's go through some of the evidence that we do have. The Orientalists don't really buy this evidence, but we do for obvious reasons, and we'll have a look now. So this map is not true to life, as we can see. Patricia Crone and her ilk, she's one of the foremost Orientalist of her time. She passed away, if I'm not mistaken, in 2015. She basically single-handedly, offhandedly rubbished most of Islamic history, be that Hadith, Quran, historiography, Tabari, Ibn Hisham, everything. Right? So during her generation, and especially before her generation, the primary methodology and the principles behind which Orientalists would work was to rubbish Islamic history. Once they realized that biblical accounts didn't stand historical analysis, they turned towards the Quran, and their primary goal was to rubbish our history. Today, it's not so severe. Today, with the new generation of Orientalists that are being manufactured in Western universities, they're a bit more kinder. They don't accept the premises of the past generation, and they do accept, up to a degree, some more than others, that yes, the Quran is authentic. Yes, we do have the Quran going back right to the beginning. The Hadith they still have problems with, and yes, most of our Islamic history, as we say it, is accurate. even though they give their spin on it. So they may not agree with our interpretation, they will give their interpretation. So when we talk about Mecca, we have to look at what the classical Romans and Greeks said and see what they have to say. So I'm sure you're probably aware of this recent phenomenon where they're trying to prove that Mecca was actually in Nabatea and the Kaaba was a sanctuary, one of many that happened to be in Nabatea somewhere. That Mecca didn't exist where it should, and that the Kaaba was not in Mecca but in Nabatea. Right? Well, I'm not going to go into these conspiracy theories and poor scholarship and nonsense like that. It doesn't behoove me as a historian or you as students of history to be looking at nonsense like that. But we will analyze other stuff. So this is Arabia Felix on a map by Ptolemy. This is in the 2nd century. So on the left hand side it says Mecca, right? It says Mecca because this is 7th century. Second century, right? I'm amazed that they've put Mecca there, right? So I have my doubts on how old this actual map is. It does look like a 2nd century map, but they've managed to place Mecca Patria. So if they're talking about Patria should be more up north. It's even got Medina there, Medina Tal Nabi. Right, so how can this be a 2nd century map? Okay, so my observations are correct. This map, which is being put as a 2nd century map, which I just basically copied without scrutinizing the source, I just copied and pasted it. Right, so this is not a 2nd century map because they've got Madinatul Nabi written there. Right, and they've got Mecca. Okay, but this is an early map, so you can see what they knew about Arabia back then. They've got the city of Aden in the south. They've got Zibet, I don't know what that is. Zabur, I think it was, is the capital of the Yemen in the south. And it's quite detailed for the African side, but there's not much information on the Arabian side. This is an Ottoman Empire time map. So this is a very recent map. It's showing you the Hijaz Railway. And the Hijaz Railway basically traverses the ancient trade route. The trade route that goes up from Yemen up to Damascus. There are other trade routes we know that crisscross the desert and go via, we read about it last lesson, that go from the Tigris River, moving across the desert towards Syria, that way passing Iraq, going through the Fertile Crescent. But this is the one that is on the western seaboard. So the train started at Damascus, and you can see Busra, then you can see Amman, and then it goes down to Ma'an, and then it goes to Madawa, Tabuk, and Madain Saleh and Medina. If you look in Damascus today and in Medina, you can still see the old Ottoman stations from 100 years ago. I'm guessing they're in the Art Deco style. I'm not sure, but when we look at just the date itself says Art Deco. And I did see a picture once a long time ago, and I think it is in that kind of a style. But most people don't know because Saudi Arabia doesn't really push this part of its history because it's Ottoman history. And if you go into the museum in Amman, you can actually see one of the old trains, and across the desert, if you know where to look, you'll find some of the tracks. And the tracks that the Ottomans used were German made, and they were slightly narrower compared to regular tracks, which means that the British or anybody else could not put their own rolling stock on there and use those tracks in able to get down to Medina. Fascinating history. If you want to know about the last stand at Medina by a Turkish commander who basically protected Medina and protected the grave of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, very famous, he's celebrated Turk because the Arabs, the marauding Arabs invaded and caused problems. And this is to do with the First World War, and even before, if we look at Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab's movement in 1801, 1802, when they attacked Mecca and Medina and ransacked it and ran amok in the holy sites. and there's a grave punishment for the people that disturb the people of Medina. It was done, unfortunately, and if you really want to know about this era of history, you need to read around the First World War, Lawrence of Arabia, the First World War, the Sykes-Picot happened at the same time, the creation of Israel, Balfour Declaration, the last stand of the Ottoman Empire, the Young Turks movement, the Armenian massacre, and all of this ties in. It's a history in its own frame. So we're talking from the late 19th century, which would be 1850 all the way to the end of the Second World War and the partitioning. Actually, you can take it all the way up to the emancipation and the freeing. The emancipation isn't the right word. The independence of many of the Arab states. So Iraq became independent, Syria became a nation, Lebanon was created. After that we had Algeria, we had Morocco, those countries gained independence. Libya gained independence from Italy, Egypt, and then on the other side we had India, Pakistan gained independence and stuff like that. So just showing you how the railway was in the Arabian Peninsula. Okay, here's another map. It's a very old map from 1720. This one's confirmed, by the way. So this is a very old map. Assalamu alaikum, Nasser, welcome. So can we have somebody read? Can we have Shahid read, please?
Yeah, where shall I begin?
This map of the Arabian Peninsula.
This map of the Arabian Peninsula, published in 1720, shows Arabia Felix, Arabia Deserta, and Arabia Petrea. Other regions included are Palestine, Mesopotamia, Chaldea, Persia, Egyptus, and Ethiopia. A large number of towns are shown. The title cartouche includes 9 virginet coins. The tribal The tribal and town names on the map are those used by Ptolemy. Some are used more than once with variations. Thus, Indikara, Aikara, and Alfana all should indicate the same place, the spot where Alexander the Great intended to build a capital on an island in the Arabian Gulf, enabling him to control the trade of the region and extend his empire, a scheme that he was unable to accomplish before he died.
Thank you very much. So nobody, doesn't matter how great they were able to conquer the internal regions. The greatest empires on earth were unable to, but their vassals did. So the Lukhmids and the Ghassanids, and to an extent the Iranians, did have influence all the way up to Mecca. All the way up to, and then internally we had the Kinda, they had influence over Mecca as well. Abraha, he tried and it didn't really work. But even Abraha and those guys, they really did mess about in the interior. So when we're told that it was a blank canvas and that nobody actually managed to conquer, and all the greatest emperors stopped at the gates of the desert and said, what is there here? That's actually incorrect. They all wanted to, only for trade. It wasn't because there was nothing there. Yes, there was nothing there, but they wanted to conquer the region for trade that was coming from the south and from India, and as we've been reading for the last few weeks. But they didn't accomplish it because it would have cost more lives than it was worth, right? So better to save your army, better to save your time and manage it elsewhere. You're still trading, you're just paying higher taxes. That's the only difference. Whereas internally, especially with the Iranians who had the Lukhmids and then the Romans who had the Ghassanids, they actually penetrated very, very deeply. We saw that they influenced Mecca. We saw that they influenced Medina. The Persians had tax collectors in Yathrib, right? That's actually really amazing. We're taught that internally we're taught that the Arabian Peninsula was safe from everything that was happening around it. It was a pristine, ground zero, blank canvas, right? It wasn't, because everybody and their dog was playing around, as we saw in Central Arabia. So we had Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. Nasser, welcome. It's been a long while you've not joined us. It's amazing to know that the Persians were actually tax collecting through Jewish tax collectors in Medina. The name Marziban is a tax collector. It's a Persian name, means tax collector. And the Luhmids had influence up to Thaqif, up to Bani Thaqif, which were in Taif. Taif is around the corner from Mecca. We had Kinda interfering in the affairs of Mecca. We had Abraha marching up from the north and waging war with the people of Yathrib and waging war with Kinda and the Luhmites. Right? So Mecca was caught in between. Nobody really bothered with Mecca because Mecca was insignificant at that time. Had Mecca been a trading hub or a big something big, right? This is the whole Orientalist argument. We tend to believe that Mecca was a massive trading city. Mecca wasn't. Mecca was very small and on the grand scale of things, economically insignificant. Had it been, then Mecca would have been vanquished a long time ago, just like they attacked Medina, Yathrib at that time, just like every other city was attacked. In fact, Abraha bypassed Mecca the first time around and went to Yathrib. It's mentioned in the beginning of the Seerah of Ibn Hisham. Right? So that shows you that Mecca was not of strategic importance. And I think that's a good thing. You know, if we look at it from a long historical lens, I think that's a good thing because it kept them immune. Actually, it's I wouldn't say immune because they were all involved in all of the external politics one way or another. It didn't keep them immune, but there was probably a blessing in that nobody really meddled with them. They just saw them as a people who had a holy sanctuary, that were poor, that weren't very civilized, and they just let them carry on with their sanctuary, and they wouldn't attack them because 4 months of the year were sacred months, and when you come to pilgrimage, there's no fighting or anything else. So, okay, Nasser, can we have you read the next one, please? Are you on your mobile phone?
No, yeah, no, because I was on the portrait. Yeah, okay, I can see it now. This 1616 map is a reprint of a map originally published in 1598 by Josephus Hondius, a Flemish cartographer and engraver who settled in Amsterdam in about 1593 and established a business that produced globes and the first large maps of the world. The map covers the territory from west of the Gulf of Suez to the eastern side of the Arabian Peninsula and from the mouth of the Euphrates River to Aden. The only cities indicated on the western coast of the Persian or Arabian Gulf are Qatar and Qatifa. The map shows sandbanks around the coast and rivers at Medina and Mecca. Few towns and regions are shown, and there is a range of mountains in the center of the peninsula. Al-Qatif is repeated as the town Qatifa and the region Al-Qatif. The peninsula opposite Bahrain Island, shown unnamed, is marked as where Qatar is found. The commonly noted rivers of the Arabian coast are shown as very close together. The Arabian Gulf is called Persicus Sinus, Persian Gulf, and there is no name given for the Red Sea. The Ayaman area is shown as the most populated area on the map. The cartographer uses castles to denote cities and dotted lines to show the division of the Arabian Peninsula into 3 parts.
Thank you very much. So you can see the 3 parts there. On the bottom hand side, you can again see that name Zibit. I don't know what that name is. Arabia Felix is in the bottom. Patria is at the top, and Deserta is on the right hand side. So these demarcations are not accurate representations, but that's obviously a given because somebody's drawing the map without having to, you know, with the tools that we have today. And you can see Mecca, it says Mecha. It's quite high up. Obviously at that time they knew where Mecca was. So this is another map from 1578. So we're going even further back now. So can we have Aisha read, please?
This map from how do I say that name?
Ptolemy.
Ptolemy's Geographia was published in 1578 and reprinted on many occasions between 1584 and 1704. It is much more finely engraved than maps in previous
Silent P.
Ptolemy, thank you, editions. The map mentions several places in present-day Qatar: Abusia, Leoniti, Themai, Asatini, and Ayagi. Names added to this edition of the map include Mesmites, Simis, Idikar, and a second Idikar located in present-day Kuwait. This name is similar to the island of Ichara, found near Magurum Simis. Contemporary research has confirmed that Kharj is the island known to the ancients as Ikara. One of the major peninsulas shown on the map is named Extrema near Qatar, and modern scholarship has identified Chersonosus as Ras Rakan in present-day Qatar. H2 Phagorium Sinus is the Gulf inhabited by the people identified in ancient histories as the fish eaters. Claudius Ptolemaeus, known as English as Ptolemy, was an ancient mathematician, astronomer, geographer, and astrologer who was born sometime after 83 AD, most likely in a town in the Thebaid called Ptolemais. Here, in Roman Egypt. He lived in Egypt and died in Alexandria around the year 1680.
Okay, excellent. So because that's a very early map, you can see it doesn't look much like how we see the world today. The Red Sea is very large, the Arabian Peninsula is very thin, and the Persian Gulf is massive. And we can't zoom in to see the name of the cities, but some of these names are hard to identify, other names are not there. So here's another map. I'll read this one. So this map is Rigobert Bayon's 1771 decorative map of the Arabian Peninsula. Covers from the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean and from the Red Sea to the Persian Gulf. Includes the modern day nations of Saudi Arabia, Israel, Jordan, Kuwait, Iraq, Yemen, Oman, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. Names Mount Sinai, Mecca and Jerusalem, as well as countless other cities and desert oases. Also notes numerous offshore shoals, reefs and other dangers in the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf. There is a large decorative tied to a cartouche in the upper right hand quadrant. A fine map of the region drawn by R. Bond in 1771 from issue as plate number 85 Jeanlat. Okay, issue of the Atlas. So when they're mentioning reefs and everything, that means they've got a lot of detail. So this is a highly detailed map. It does show the mountains and it does show you some of the northern ranges near the Najd area as well. But how detailed it is, because we can't zoom in, I don't know. You can zoom in if you see, if on my PowerPoint I can zoom in quite large, but to keep it where we can put it onto one slide, it's obviously difficult. Again, this is another map we're not going to read, we just have a look at it. This is from 1780. Maybe we can see Mecca there, I'm not sure. I think I can see Mecca there. And it does seem to be a bit more lower down. This is a historic map rendering Ethiopia and Egypt. What's so good about this map? Let's have a look. Okay, so this one now has Latin and contemporary Arabic names, which is actually quite good because that's what we need to compare with. It's from 1865, so they obviously got a bit more sensible and started to include Arab names as well. So it's interesting to see which cities and hamlets did exist and don't exist now, or didn't exist then and exist now. This is by Nicholas Germanus in 1467. So this is the oldest map that we've got so far, which I've shown you today. Again, the Red Sea is looking massive. The Persian Gulf is looking absolutely massive. The Straits of Hormuz are there, looking very strange. But it does look like the peninsula. Right? And I don't know if they've got Mecca showing there or not. This is another map, 1561, copper engraving. It says Felix Arabia Deserta is in the wrong place. Actually, no, it's probably the way that, it's just probably the way they've done it. The perspective is off everywhere. There's nothing there that I can recognize. Right, so this is a map of Persia and Arabia from 1855. Covers Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Jordan, and the Arabian Peninsula. So it details the desert trading routes, oasis trading centers, and beautiful hand color. So this is from 1855, so it looks much better and looks exactly like we would know it today. This is the Fertile Crescent. So when I kept mentioning the Fertile Crescent, you can see that it starts from Babylonia and it's like a crescent moon. So this is where the two rivers empty into the sea, and it goes up Assyria, Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent. I'm just reading the names, but really all of that is Mesopotamia or the Fertile Crescent. Then it moves into Syria, touches Anatolia, and then it goes down into Gaza. So this area is very green compared to everywhere else. So Mesopotamia in Greek means the land between the two rivers. So the two rivers are the Tigris and the Euphrates. On the other side, there's the River Nile. As you can see on the left, it's green, and the green area underneath where Yemen is as well, that's quite green. We had a look at this area in Google Maps as well. There's 4 rivers of paradise. The rivers, I don't know how strong the hadith is, but there's the Tigris, the Euphrates, the Nile, and there's a 4th river. And this is the reason why in Islamic, the concept of the Islamic garden, we have char bagh, right? It's basically one garden, but they've dissected it crossways, and then it becomes 4 gardens, 4 separate gardens, and the rivers is supposed to be 4 rivers. So it's a human representation of Jannah. So whenever you see a Mughal garden or you see a Persian garden, there's a method to gardens around the world. So when we look at a Chinese garden, there's a method to what you see. So if you see like an English country garden is very well laid out, very well planned, very beautiful. So you can say, okay, we can understand what's going on here. But when you look at a Japanese garden or you look at a Chinese garden, it might be a bit more chaotic, but it's not really. It's done in that design for a specific reason. Whereas in the English garden, you have straight lines, so you can see who's approaching from far away. But whereas in the idea of a Chinese garden or a Japanese garden, especially a Chinese garden, is that you're supposed to happen across your guests. So if the guests are waiting in the garden, you can't see them until you go around a corner and then you bump into them. Or if you're the host and they're coming into your abode, it's like, oh, fancy seeing you here. So there's a beauty in everything. And the concept of, I wrote a paper a long time ago, probably about 20 years, almost 20 years ago, called The Archetype of the Primordial Highly in the Purification of the Soul. And then I give the argument of the Islamic garden, of how your soul is like an Islamic garden, right? And how an Islamic garden functions is how your soul should function. If anybody's interested in reading it, I could send it to you. So there's alchemy, there's spiritual alchemy. Any fine art in this world, there's always spiritual alchemy built into it. So for everybody else, it's just a garden, it's just a rose clipping. Yes, it can be appreciated for its rose clipping. Maybe it gets boring after a while. Maybe it's boring for people who don't like rose clippings. But certainly when you infuse alchemy into that rose clipping, now you have the external, physical, and the internal, spiritual. And then it never gets boring. For people who read the signs of the spiritual in the physical world by making a rose clipping, and then by like how they display it in a stand, that's an art in itself. They never get bored of these things because they're looking at the hidden which you don't see. And if you can't interpret the beauty of the manifest, how will you ever interpret the hidden beauty which is invisible? So those who can see the internal beauty never get bored with the internal or the external. In fact, they always focus on the internal anyway, so the external doesn't really matter to them. That's why if you look at Japanese culture, the samurai, this hard and fast and warrior, right? When they kill, it's quite aggressive, the sounds they make and everything, right? No mercy. And then to save their honor, they commit suicide in quite a horrific way. when they cut themselves, and then they cut themselves up as well. So you cut sideways across your belly, and then you move up towards your liver or your heart. And then just before you do that, you have to write a poem. And then in many pictures of suicide, Japanese suicides have a poem in the back. So you're thinking, how does this even tally up? It's the balance of life. It's the beauty in everything. So it's a perfect balance. The samurai knows what he's doing. So in their off time, what did the samurai do? They would cultivate beautiful gardens, and they would spend time cutting these flowers and arranging them in beautiful assortments to put them in bottles or vases and to display them. Right? So this is the balance of life, and this is the beauty in life. So the Chinese garden, the Japanese garden, then the Islamic garden. They call it Char Bagh. And the Islamic garden is completely different from the European garden. It's completely different from the Japanese, and the Japanese completely different from the European, the Chinese, because they've all got their own internal philosophies. The Char Bagh reflects the 4 rivers of paradise, which are supposedly the Euphrates, the Tigris, and the River Nile, and then the 4th river, it just evades me. I don't know what it is. And that's the idea. It's man's attempt to recreate paradise on earth. So some homework for you: look at the Islamic garden design. Char Bagh they call it. What's very sad, and I saw this in Samarkand and Bukhara, and it was amazing. When we step out of mosques in Muslim lands, you're right in the middle of a market, a heaving, bustling market. So you have the tranquility of the masjid, and then you're back out into a market with no trees. You see that in Egypt, you see that in Syria, you see that in Pakistan. But in Central Asia, it's amazing. The graveyards are the most beautiful graveyards I've ever seen. They are abodes of peace. Like, I'm serious, they are abodes of peace. And then they have reminders everywhere to make dua. I even saw a grave so beautifully adorned with flower beds around it, benches around it for people to sit and reflect. And above you there was a shelter, sheltering you from the sun. That's a beautiful design. Who does that in our graveyards? And then when you go to the shrines, the amount of greenery, the amount of quiet, reflective space you see there is amazing. And then even some of the mosques, right? Some of the mosques, just before you exit into the bazaar or wherever, the mosque is capped off by a green area. And it's a totally different feel. And then you think, when did Muslims lose this beauty? Yes, you can understand certain mosques in the center of town, like in Cairo, they're going to back up onto a bazaar. Internally, it's a haven. But the problem is that we've lost the art of creating our internal spaces as havens as well. Because we've lost manners. So we will disrespect the mosque by talking loudly, by walking loudly. When I say walking loudly, I mean walking as in strutting, as opposed to humbly walking in the house of God, or dressing inappropriately that is jarring. You just look like a sore, like a boil on the fabric of the mosque. Whereas in Central Asia, it's amazing. Some of the mosques I saw in Bukhara, like 1 or 2 of them, and Samarkand, really struck me. And I recorded them. Inshallah, I'll put them up on YouTube. And it's like, just the effect it has on you, right? It has a psychological effect on you. You just feel something different. And that's the magic happening. That's the magic that started happening on the physical plane, and it draws you in. And once you're in, you enter the spiritual realm. But if you're wearing 3-piece shorts and you're walking into the mosque and people are talking loudly and people are dressing appropriately and sitting and lounging around everywhere on their mobile phones, how are you going to get drawn into the spiritual? So I really believe that mosque committees really need to clamp down on what happens in mosques, because we've lost a lot of that. And alhamdulillah, I was blessed to experience this in Samarkand and Bukhara, and all of you can experience this if you come this way, inshallah. Right, so the next slide. Right, here's the trade routes. So let's have a quick look at the trade routes. So these are the different trade routes. You can see them crisscrossing across the desert. But Rubbul Khali, which is the massive sand desert, which I told you, read Thizaj's book, he crossed it. 2 times he crossed it, and there's another character that crossed it as well in the 1940s and 50s. And those pictures I showed you of Saudis in 1945, those crazy wacko pictures, he took them. You can see there's no trade routes crisscrossing the desert. That's where the dunes are, and there's no water there, and there's no purpose for any man to be in there anyway. The trade routes always bypass oases, and towns build up. So Medina is an oasis. Mecca has water. That's why the trade route passed by. But if you look on the map there, you can see that Mecca sits in the middle, and the trade route doesn't exactly hit Mecca. It passes by, below it, and above it. So this trade isn't Meccan trade. This is Arabian trade. Mecca was not really part of the Arabian trade, right? Yathrib was. You can see the Yathrib, and then you can see all of those cities we discussed many months ago: Lihyan, Thamud, Madian, and trade passed through there into Nabatea, from Nabatea up into Syria and as far as Constantinople. But normally you would sell your goods because they wouldn't allow you into another empire. You would just go to the main town, sell your goods, and then turn back and come back. Nobody really wanted strangers into their towns. That's why when Ibrāhīm alayhi went to Egypt, he was identified straight away. Right? Back then, I even saw the walls of Bukhara. Right? Who has seen, well, the people who are from London, who's seen London Wall? Who has ever seen the ancient wall of London? Anybody? Yes or no? Quick yes or no?
No.
Right. If you hit the square mile, because old London actually is the square mile, the business district. If you hit the square mile, you can actually see cut into the buildings like stairs and parts of the old wall of London, the old perimeter wall of London. If you go to Lahore in Pakistan, you can see the wall. Many cities have an internal city, the old city, and the external city, and you can see the remnants of the wall there. You can see a very old picture of Jeddah from the air, taken probably in the 1940s, and Jeddah's it looks like a hamlet, and it's literally got a wall around it, right? So all cities had walls, and at night time, the chief of the city, the mayor, the governor, whoever you want to call him, you would be ordered in, and the gates would be locked, and nobody was allowed to go in and out until the next morning. So you can imagine those places were communities. Those places, people who are indigenous to their own lands. So for example, Amani's here, she's Syrian. They're all Syrians. So they have a sense of community and togetherness that we as expats or people of different ethnicities born in a third country, like all of us are born in England, but our grandparents or parents weren't really from England. So we're a lost generation. We don't belong. We don't feel like we belong in our parents' country, and we don't have that vibe. And because there's so much mixing and coming and going in places like London anyway, the northern cities have their own tensions. The southern cities, you don't really feel that connection. But certainly when I was in Jordan, it literally felt like everybody is one. The whole country is just one village. Everybody is just one family. When you're in Pakistan, you feel it. In Uzbekistan, I feel it. It's just everybody is one. So we're far removed from that feeling. That's why we're not patriotic. We're not patriotic for Pakistan. We're not patriotic for England, because we don't have that in us. But whereas every other country is very patriotic and nationalistic, because that's all they know. So when you go to Bukhara, and you can see the wall, you can see remnants of the wall. In Jeddah, you can see the wall, old cities. And you can actually feel like everybody is just one, and everybody knows each other, everybody cares for each other, everybody looks out for each other. And at night time, the governor's looking out for you, saying to you, listen, come inside, because you're going to get bandits and marauders outside. So we can't protect you outside. So come in, we lock you in for the night. In the morning, when the sun comes up and the bandits go and the wolves go and the wild animals go, we'll let you out again. And you can imagine the cozy feeling, the secure feeling. And those cities are very tight and cramped, so everybody knew everybody. The village thief, they knew. The village joker, they knew. Who was most handsome, they knew. Who was most ugly, they knew. Who was the prettiest girl. Any scandal, they would know, right? You would generally know the face of the governor, the chief, because he would pray. He would lead the Friday prayer, or he would appoint somebody else, and you'd get to see him. But when it came to the emperor, most people didn't know who the emperor was. They never saw his face. Nobody knew him. This is the reason why in history you find that many a time the emperors, like imposters, would sit on the throne. You have that with the early Persian Empire. people that are completely imposters that have no right to the claim somehow get close to the throne, kill the king and sit on the throne, and nobody on earth knows about it. The courtiers don't say anything and everybody thinks, oh, this is the king. And you're thinking, how? But it did happen if you don't recognize the king, right? And certainly when it came, even after in the Umayyad period, when the Khawarij tried to kill Sayyidina Ali, and they tried to kill Muawiyah and the third person, Amr ibn, I can't remember the name, the governor of Egypt. Muawiyah survived. So ever since after that, you find in mosques, especially in the Levant area, Syria, you have a special area where the governor or the leader or the emperor would pray. It was totally isolated from everybody else. And the first time that happened was after they tried to assassinate Muawiyah, where for the first time in history the leader was no longer in direct contact with their people due to the assassination attempt. Right, let's carry on. So Mecca, so this is a modern day map. So Mecca is situated halfway along the trade routes between Yemen and Asham. It is situated in the southern Hijaz in Tihama. Remember I told you Tihama is the coastline. You can Google that. It's a very, very harsh environment. It's mad. That environment is just absolutely terrible to live in. Terrible. I lived in Tihama. Right? I lived in Jazan, which is on the Red Sea coast, and without AC, I wouldn't have survived. It's about 48 miles inland from the Red Sea. It lies in a barren, rocky valley. Mecca's economical viability is its geographical position on the trade route and its pilgrimage site. The trade route holds true for the later period of Mecca, and the pilgrimage site holds true for the early period and the latter period. This is a close look at it again. So the mountains, you can see the mountains on either side. Khaybar is a hilly area, mountainous area. Al-Ula, it changes. I like the desert scenery there. Tabuk changes. Yambo is on the Red Sea, which is like the nearest coastal city to Medina. Medina sits, you can see the Harra fields. So Medina is surrounded by greenness, but that greenness is surrounded by black rock. So it's not easy to get to. And we had a look at that as well when we looked at Google Maps. Jeddah's the port city to Mecca. Mecca's not here for some reason, but Mecca's just inland 48 miles. Mecca sits at the start. If you saw Mecca on this map, I think the second map has Mecca. If you see Mecca on this map, you know why the trade routes don't pass it. The trade routes pass Taif, but then they carry on straight, but Mecca lies to the side. So this is the argument that the Orientalists hold. They say that the Mecca is not on the trade route, so how could trade be passing through? Today we know, when we had a look at the previous 2-3 lectures of exactly what was going on. So yes, we openly admit, we say yes, Mecca wasn't a trading city back then. Mecca became a trading city when all the other empires died down. So Mecca didn't really care whether it was on the trading route or not, because at that time you're talking about, Mecca wasn't a trading city. So instead of trying to rubbish the Muslims, right, the Muslims are looking at their own sources, but now from historical evidence, we can put them in its proper place and say, okay, our sources mention Mecca as a trading city. Historical sources say it's impossible. We marry both together and we say after Qusay, Mecca became a trading city because all the wars that were going on had exhausted everybody else. Before that, Mecca wasn't much of a trading city, and the other empires had mastered trade, and they were leading trade bypassing Mecca. There's no contradiction. So, but Muslims need to know this, and Orientalists need to obviously update themselves, otherwise they just look stupid, which they're doing. Right, so the Mekraba theory. As I said to you, Mecca doesn't exist or has not been mentioned on any map. So how do we try to prove Mecca? Patricia Crone and her ilk have totally rubbished it. There's many people that say, no, there's no Mecca. What are you talking about? Let's see what we can gather and garnish. In the old maps, we have something called Mekraba. Now, what they like to do, Orientalists like to do, is say, if you look at the Arabic root words of Mecca and Mekraba, it doesn't match. So no way on earth can Mekraba, which does sound like Mecca, be Mecca. We can say, okay, from a linguistic perspective, yes, you're right. Mekraba, which is a a corruption of a particular name back then. Doesn't sound like Mecca if we look at the root word, right? But let's see what Mecca, where it really came from. And if you remember back to our earliest lesson on Sheba, on Saba, the Sabbaic Empire, you'll see the semblance, right? The ancients had a lot of knowledge on Saba, right? So they're just borrowing names and placing them somewhere else. So for example, this is a theory that independently came to me, and other people had come to the same sort of knowledge. I probably touched upon it somewhere before, and then I added 2 and 2 and made 4, and 2 times 2 and made 4. And I was like, oh, okay. And then you check it and you think somebody's done more work than you on this, and wow, that's amazing. So you're on the right trail here. So Mecca Rabba, Lord's Mecca. That's one translation. Mecca Rabba. Okay, let's say it is, let's say it's not. Doesn't matter, let's move on. The root word MKK, right? That stands for a house in the Babylonian language. That sounds for a house. Do you remember we looked at the word Kaʿbah, and we said that there was more than one Kaʿbah, and Kaʿbah means a sanctified building, and it was they were in the south as well, and they served different purposes. The names changed slightly, right? And I can't even remember now what Ahmad Jalad said about this word. It actually originates in the south, the name of it, or whatever it may be. So Rabba, Lord or Allah in southern Arabia. Rabb means your cherisher, nourisher, nurturer, your nurturer, your cherisher. Rabb, it's a very old word. In southern Arabia, it's the same word. In North Arabia, it's the same word. Makrab or mikrab, temple. In southern Arabia, a mikrab. Do you remember I taught you that the heads used to be called mukarrib? That's why we say they're not Arabs. That's why I told you these are the proofs that we used to say to know that they are not Arabs. Mukarrib is known as a priest king in the Yemenite kingdoms. Arabs never had priest kings. They had qahins and they had sayyids or sharifs or sheikhs, right? And they were separate. They were completely separate. You can say that church and state, if you want to use that word, church and state were separate. Whereas with the Sabaean Empire, Mukarribs were priest kings. So it was a marriage of church and state. There was no separation of church and state, right? So these names and stuff, we knew these names, right? The Greeks and them people knew these names. So if you add these together, Makaraba, wherever that name came from, it gives you an understanding. So even though it was not Makaraba, even though it was nothing to do with Mukarrib, but if they're trying to give it that identity, why? Was it because maybe Mecca had a sanctuary and there was a place where what they called Makaraba, which isn't Mecca? Makaraba is its own name, but is it because Makaraba had a holy sanctuary? Right? Orientalists just love to rubbish even this theory. That's because they've got this hatred for Islam, right? But this makes absolute common sense. Makaraba sounds like the name of the heads of Saba, the Mukarribs. They were priest kings. This name was possibly known to the ancient Greeks, hence they called Mecca Makaraba. Not Mecca as in Makaraba, but Makaraba as in Mukarrib, holy city, holy place. Mecca Rabba, Lord's Mecca. Do you understand what I'm trying to say now? Right? It's just a different name applied. It's like us looking at a mosque and saying, us looking at a church and saying, oh yeah, this is the mosque of the Christians. No, it's not a mosque, but we're using a different word to denote church. So this is exactly what's happening here. Nobody is saying that Makaraba is the word Mecca. Yeah, so the Orientalists don't need to get stomach aches over it. We're not saying that. We're saying they're just using a different word to identify Mecca, which makes logical sense. The name Mecca has a Babylonian cognate meaning house, according to Dr. Amal Muhammad al-Rubi. Ibrāhīm came from the north and that area. So what was the original name of Mecca? He founded the city of Mecca. So when did Ibrāhīm a.s. call it Mecca? if he didn't call it because there was nothing there in his time, did his son or his son's son call it Mecca at some point? It's possible, because don't forget, Ibrāhīm and his son and his son's son, for a few generations, they kept their northern Syrian, Iraqi, Amorite heritage. Right? So Mecca comes from there, most probably. Amanius Marcellinonius in his history doesn't mention Makraba, but instead mentions a city he calls, now this is interesting, Hierapolis. This name consists of Hera meaning holy and polis meaning city, thus holy city. Right, now the Orientalists will say there's a dozen holy cities in the Arabian Peninsula. Okay, you carry on thinking that. We like to think that this holy city is Mecca. Even if it's not, we have the Makaraba theory, we have Mukarrib, we have our own ideas of how we can prove that Mecca did exist. And let's say all of them are wrong, we believe it because the Quran says so. Possibly earlier mentions are not unambiguous. The Greek historian Diodorus Siculus writes about Arabia in the 1st century BCE in his work Bibliotheca Historica, describing the holy shrine, and a temple has been set up there which is very holy and exceedingly revered by all Arabians. An Orientalist can turn around and say, well, this could have been Taif, this could have been Nakhla, this could have been any of those temples that we discussed in previous lectures that we showed you pictures about and we mentioned from Arabian sources and other sources. Actually, I don't believe that theory from an Orientalist. Why? Because he's saying that this was revered by all Arabians. Not every Arab is going to go to Nakhla to worship a god he doesn't have in his own pantheon. Right? Not everyone's going to go to other places for that. But for all Arabs to revere it, sounds like Mecca, sounds like Kaaba. Ptolemy names 50 cities in Arabia with sometimes wrong locations, and he lists one city called Makraba. Another problem is that all of these old maps, the cities are way off. So just because the cities are way off, we don't look at cities on maps to denote correct places. We expect them to be way off by hundreds of miles. Why? Because they never had cartography tools. They never had the tools that we have to make maps. But the very fact that they've mentioned a city with a name similar, even if it's in Yemen, for example, would make us think, okay, they're mentioning possibly Mecca. The Roman historian Amanius Marcellinus also enumerated many cities in Western Arabia, most of which can be identified. According to Bossok, he did mention Mecca as Geopolis or Hierapolis, the latter one meaning holy city, potentially referring to the sanctuary of the Kaaba. Prosopius in the 6th century statement that the Ma'ad tribe is one of the massive tribes of Arabia, we look at them today inshallah, possessed the coast of Western Arabia between the Ghassanid and the Himyarites. This is the Hijaz region of the south, supports the Arabic sources tradition that associates Quraysh as a branch of the Ma'ad and Muhammad as a direct descendant of Ma'ad ibn Adnan. Then we have the Thamudic inscriptions. Now when we say Thamudic, by the way, a Thamudic inscription doesn't mean it's from Thamud. Right? We discussed this before. It's a language name only. Right? So don't confuse the language name. It's like we had Safayitic, Hismatic, Thamudic, Musnad. This has got nothing to do with the place name Thamud. So some Thamudic inscriptions which were discovered in the South Jordan contained names of some individuals such as Abdul Mekkat, Abd Mekkat, servant of Mecca. So here's proof. An Orientalist will say, aha, we told you Mecca was in the north. Okay, believe that. Believe Mecca was somewhere in Jordan. But for us, this is a proof. Just like we found somebody with the surname Ad. Remember? In the Wadi Rum, we found ancient writing with the surname of Ad. And we found a temple of Lat there. And because Ad and Thamud are mentioned together in the Quran, and many of the stories mentioned in the Quran refer to stuff that happened in the north of Mecca, so we can assume that that's the lost city of Ad because of that one inscription we found. So now we have an inscription from the same area saying Abdul Mekket, servant of Mecca. So where's the problem here? There were also some other inscriptions which contains personal names such as Makki, Makkan or Mecca. But Jawad Ali from the University of Baghdad suggests that there's also a probability of a tribe named Mecca. Possible? Right, so what do Islamic sources say? So Islamic sources name Mecca as Bakka, Mecca, Salah, Raham, Al-Bassa, An-Nassa and Al-Qura. Its wadi was probably used as a resting place by caravans due to the many springs. Let me just correct the spelling here. That converge there, a hallmark that can be found all along the trade routes across the desert. So Ibrāhīm alayhis salam made a dua and he says, I've left some of my progeny in a waterless plain. So you can assume from there that nobody lived there. But was it a temporary location where travelers did pass? Because we do have water there. Right? Mecca sits in the middle of a convergence of all of the mountains. So there are springs there. So where there are springs, travelers do stop. And that's why parts of Mecca or the outskirts were on the trade route. This is a hallmark of caravans that water springs are on the trade routes. So the story of Ibrāhīm alayhis salam, right? So now we're going to go back, not Ibrāhīm what we did before, but how Ismāʿīl alayhis salam ended up in Mecca. I asked the question and you lot said yes, we want to hear it. Okay, so we all know the famous story and there's no real need to go into it in great detail. He left his wife and child in a barren valley. Zamzam sprang up, Jurham settled there, and the rest is history. The end. Okay, we done that part. Actually, I'm joking, we haven't. Let's have a look a bit further. So it started with Abraham. It started with a supplication when he said, Rabbi habli minas salihin. My Lord, grant me a child from amongst the righteous. Now, this is very different from the biblical account, right? Grant me a righteous child. This is the extra from the Bible, right? So Abraham was old. They say he was 80s or 90s. He circumcised himself when he was 99. That's the covenant that God took from them. The spiritual covenant of belief and the physical manifestation are signs of fitrah, circumcision. That's one of the signs that you have entered into the covenant of God. This law came down when Ibrāhīm as-salam was 99 years of age. Him and his son did it, and all Arabs and Jews do it. You'd be surprised to know that most of the world doesn't do it. Hindus are our brothers in ethnicity, but no Hindu will circumcise, right? Regarding moving pubic hair, no Hindu, male or female, will do that. The Chinese, they won't circumcise. Nobody circumcises apart from some primitive tribes and the Arabs and the Jews. And that's something very amazing. Something that's a part of our fitrah, circumcision for men and removing pubic hair and underarm hair. Most of the world doesn't enjoy that. Doesn't matter if a Hindu or somebody from Nepal or a Buddhist from Afghanistan or something like that looks like you. It doesn't mean that he has the same fitrah spirit coursing through his veins. He's blunted it by virtue of his religion. He won't circumcise. So Abraham, aged and childless, lifts his heart to heaven, asking not for joy, but for a righteous lineage. This connects his spiritual yearning to the eventual raising of Ismāʿīl, the Kaʿbah and Mecca. So we gave him good tidings of a forbearing son. This account is more rich than the biblical account, which we shall look at now. So, can we have Amani? Is Amani there? She's gone. All right. Can we have Nasser read? Oh, okay, Amani. Amani, do you want to read? You're here, yeah? Yeah. Do you want to read the biblical account in Genesis? That's Genesis book 15, chapter 2, book Genesis, which is book 1, chapter 15, verse 2 to 6.
Okay. But Abraham said, Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate in Eliezer of Damascus? 3. And Abraham said, you have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. 4. Then the word of the Lord came to him, this man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. 5. He took him outside and said, look up at the sky and count the stars. If needed, you can count them. Then he said to him, so shall your offspring be.
Last
Abraham
verse.
Believed the Lord, and he credited it to him, as right.
Righteousness. Well done. Thank you for reading. Yeah, thank you for reading. Are you using a computer or your phone, by the way?
Okay. No, my phone.
Yeah, that's why you're having difficulties reading. All right, okay.
I'm using my phone.
So some clues. We studied this last lesson. It says, but Abraham, right? Remember, we told you that the name in Amorite is Abram. The name pronounced in the Aramite language. Abraham was not Jewish, was not Arab, was not Babylonian, was not Chaldean, was not Iraqi. He was Amorite. So Abram is his name. At a later time, it was changed to Abraham, and the Arab rendition is Ibrāhīm. Abram is written clearly Abram here. Abraham made a beautiful prayer in the Bible. He said, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my state is Eliezer of Damascus. Now, we studied this last time. This is the proof that we use to show that Abraham was Amorite, because this is an Amorite custom. It's not a custom of the Jewish people of that area. This is pre-Jewish people. It wasn't the custom of the Egyptians or of those people in that area. So this is proof we use that he was Amorite. And Abraham said, you have given me no children, so a servant in my house. So he's basically saying to God, oh God, you haven't given me anybody, so this servant of mine will be my inheritor. But the Quran says it in a more beautiful way. The Quran says, my Lord, grant me from amongst the righteous. So his actual dua was, Ya Allah, give me somebody righteous. But the Bible is saying, now Allah knows, did he say the Quranic words and he also had a complaint? But I don't think Abraham was someone that complained, right? If Abraham didn't complain, remember we got a good understanding of Abraham's personality. Abraham didn't even complain when he was being thrown into the fire. He told the angel, go away, right? So I don't think it's gonna, they say the highest station is not one of complaint. The highest station is one of submission. So did Abraham complain to his Lord about this? Allahu A'lam. It's in the Bible. We don't reject, we don't accept. It's a nice story, right? But we know in the Quran that he said, my Lord, grant me a child from amongst the righteous. Then the word of the Lord came to him, this man will not be your heir. So the word of the Lord, this is probably Angel Gabriel, or revelation, however it came to him. But a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. He took him outside and said, look up at the sky and count the stars. This is a beautiful line in the Bible, by the way. He said, look up and count the stars in the sky, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. Right? Now, something in this line, if indeed you can count them, is like the way the Quran speaks. We know Allah speaks like this. Right? So this gives a bit more credence that maybe this actual line is Allah's line. Right? Again, it's the Bible. We don't know. We don't deny. We don't very quickly say yes. It's a nice story. Most probably this was the dialogue that took place between Allah and Abraham. If it took place, it was a beautiful dialogue. If it didn't take place, it's still a beautiful story. But when the Bible says, if indeed you can count them, this is the way Allah speaks in the Quran as well. Right? So Allah says, basically Allah's comforting him, saying, listen, you're an old man. Your wife is barren. She cannot give child. You're past the age of having children, both of you. right? But not only am I going to give you a child, look at what's going to happen to your progeny. This is like Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam when Allah says, surely your Lord will satisfy you. And what was the satisfaction for Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? That everybody become Muslim. And generation upon generation upon generation upon generation become a Muslim. So this is, we have the friend and we have the Habib. And both of them had similar personalities. Both of them looked like each other. And Allah is saying similar words to them. Ya Ilahi, Allahu Akbar. Beautiful. Beautiful biblical quote and a beautiful Quranic quote when Allah talks to Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So Abraham believed the Lord and he credited it to him as righteousness. The Quran says, my Lord, grant me a child from amongst the righteous. Can we have Nasser read, please? Nasser's around?
Oh yeah, I was still on mute, sorry. Now Sarai, Abraham's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hājar. So she said to Abraham, the Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her. Abraham agreed to what Sarai said. So after Abraham had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian slave Hājar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hājar and she conceived.
Okay, excellent. So we can even see the name Sarai. This is an Amorite name. Afterwards, the name became Seerah. Sarah, and Abraham became Abraham. So we have the Amorite names here, Sarai and Abraham here. So the Quran just says, so we gave him good tidings of a forbearing boy. We understand this story that Hagar was either a free woman, one of the royal household, so she was a princess or a courtly lady or a noble lady that was given to Ibrāhīm alayhi salam when he took his wife Sarai back from, not Pharaoh, back from the king at that time. He sent them off with a gift, right? Also, there's an understanding that she was a slave also. The Bible says slave, but when I've heard Muslim accounts, I've heard that it's not a slave. But whether it's a slave or not a slave, it doesn't make a diddly squat difference, right? And the slave is what your right hand owns, and if you sleep with your slave and you have a child, that child is halal, and then that slave becomes walad and she has to be freed. Can we have Maryam read, please? Okay, by the way, I'm just going to stop you lot here. Right, so our hour is finished. Right, so should we carry on or should we finish?
I can do a little bit more, but not too much, for half an hour.
Yeah, but it actually seems like we didn't learn much today, right?
I think it was okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't learn much because we're used to 5-hour lessons. So now you know when people now you know when people teach 1 hour Seerah, how short they make the lessons, right? And like I joined a course for Seerah online, and after like the first few lessons, I just couldn't do it because they're trying to cram in so much into 1 hour.
I think 1 hour is a bit short, but a couple of hours is okay.
Yeah, I'll carry on for another hour. I actually thought I would finish it very quickly, but.
I mean, 4 or 5 hours can get a little bit tiring, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
Obviously, I'm speaking for myself. I don't know about you, but I'm sure because you're doing most of the speaking out here, so you must feel tired at the end.
I never feel tired. Seerah is my lifeblood. I never feel tired.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
Another half an hour and that was fine for me.
All right, inshallah, we'll do another half an hour. Okay, so let me do the reading then, so we can do it quickly. So early the next morning, Abraham took some food and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He set them on her shoulders and then sent her off with the boy. She went on her way and wandered in the desert of Bethsheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went off and sat down about a bow shot away, for she thought, I cannot watch the boy die. And as she sat there, she began to sob. God heard the boy crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What is the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. So she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. Now this sounds so much like the Islamic version, but this is actually the biblical version. This is what's written in the Bible. The Quranic account is basically the same, right? You know, she runs 7 times from well, when I say Quranic account, it's not in the Quran, but we know from the Sunnah that she runs 7 times from mount to mount, looking for any caravan or any sign of life. The boy is thirsty, the boy is crying, and then the angel comes and he digs up the water, and then lo and behold, there's water there. So both stories are incredibly similar, both sources, because they have the same source, right? So the Quranic account, our Lord, Ibrāhīm alayhi makes a dua. He says, "Our Lord, I have settled some of my descendants in an uncultivated valley near your sacred house." So this is very interesting to note here now. That means before the Kaʿbah was built, there was something there. Our Lord, that they may establish prayer. So make hearts among the people inclined towards them, and provide for them from the fruits that they may be grateful. Unless this verse was said by him after they created the Kaaba. So this is something to look at, because he says, "I've left some of my descendants." Right? So when you see stuff like that, then you have to question and think, okay, what does he mean here? So it's possible this verse was done after the Kaaba was made, and he was going, or it was right at the beginning. But anyhow, this is one of his du'as. In Bukhari, we have, can we have Shahid read, please?
The first lady to use a girdle was the mother of Ismāʿīl. She used a girdle so that she might hide her tracks from Seerah. Ibrāhīm brought her and her son Ismāʿīl, while she was suckling him, to a place near the Kaaba under a tree on the spot of Zamzam, at the highest place in the mosque. In those days there was nobody in Mecca, nor was there any water, so he made them sit over there and placed them a leather bag containing some dates and a small water skin containing some water, and set out homeward. Ismāʿīl's mother followed him, saying, "O Ibrāhīm, where are you going, leaving us in this valley where there is no person whose company we may enjoy, nor is there anything to enjoy?" She repeated that to him many times, but he did not look back at her. Then she asked him, "Has Allah ordered you to do so?" He said, "Yes." She said, "Then he will not neglect us," and returned while Ibrāhīm proceeded onwards. When she reached the mountain of As-Safa, she looked in the valley keenly so that she might see somebody, but she could not see anybody. Then she descended from As-Safa, and when she reached the valley, she ran until she reached the mountain of Al-Marwa. She ran between Al-Safa and Al-Marwa 7 times. Then she heard a voice, and she said to that strange voice, help us if you can offer any help." Lo, she saw an angel at the place of Zamzam, digging the earth with his heel or his wing, till water flowed from that place. She started to make a basin around it, using her hand in this way, and started filling her water skin with water with her hands, and the water was flowing out, and she had scooped some of it.
Thank you. Well done. Well done. God bless you. So this is the same dua. And then comes the command to sacrifice Isaac. So the biblical account, sometime later, God tested Abraham. Look, the names change now. God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham, here I am," he replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac." That's an interesting one here, because we say it's Ishmael, but I'll touch on that in a bit. "Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Here I am, he replied. Do not lay a hand on the boy, he said. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. So again, this is exactly what the Quranic story is like. The only difference is the name, Isaac. Now let's read the Quran. I'll read the Quranic story. And when he reached with him the age of exertion, he said, O my son, indeed I have seen in a dream that I must sacrifice you, so see what you think. He said, O my father, do as you are commanded. You will find me, if Allah wills, of the steadfast. And when they had both submitted, and he put him down upon his forehead, we called to him, O Abraham, you have fulfilled the vision. Indeed, we thus reward the doers of good. Indeed, this was the clear trial, and we ransomed him with a great sacrifice. So both the biblical account and the Quranic account are similar, apart from some details. The Quran says it was a dream. God spoke. The Bible account tends to give you that God spoke directly to him. And then the sacrifice, the burnt offering, traditionally the Jews, the people of the biblical people, their way of sacrifice was, if you look at the early sacrifice of Cain and Abel, they both sacrificed to God, and Allah accepted the sacrifice of Abel but not of Cain. And how was it accepted? Lightning struck it and it burnt. Allah knows how true this story is, and then this is one of the reasons why Cain had a problem with his brother, and then he ended up killing him. So this is what the Jews used to do. So sacrifice and then burning the body, or whatever it may have been, right? The Jews or the people before the Jews. But whereas with Ibrāhīm alayhi salam, we know in the Quran that it was just a sacrifice. Okay? But the crucial thing missing here is a name. There's no name here, right? So there's no name Ismāʿīl alayhi salam in the Quran. So something very interesting to know is we don't know for sure which son it was. The dominant theory is that it was Ismāʿīl alayhi salam. That's the dominant theory. But there is equally a theory that it was Ishaq alayhi salam. Right? Because we just don't know. The Quran, just like the Quran doesn't mention the name Nimrud, just like the Quran doesn't mention other things, then now we tend to look at Rawayat Israeliyat. We tend to look at Jewish stories to see what did the Jews have to say about this. Oh, the Jews said Isaac. Okay, so it's Isaac. Or the Jews said whatever in some other account. They said Nimrod. So okay, it's Nimrod. The story to do with Abraham or something like that. Right? So we don't know which son it was, but we go with the opinion that was Ismāʿīl alayhi salam. Rebuilding the Kaʿbah, the Quranic account, and mention when we made the house a place of return for the people and a place of security, and take, O believers, from the standing place of Abraham a place of prayer. And we charged Abraham and Ismāʿīl, saying, purify my house for those who perform tawaf, and those who are staying there for worship, and those who bow and prostrate. And mention when Abraham said, my Lord, make this a secure city and provide its people with fruits. Whoever of them believe in Allah and the last day, Allah said, and whoever disbelieves, I will grant him enjoyment for a little, then I will force him to the punishment of the fire, and wretched is the destination. And mention when Abraham was raising the foundations of the house, and with him Ismāʿīl, saying, our Lord, accept this from us. Indeed, you are the hearing, the knowing. Then Zamzam, Prophet Muhammad said, Ibrāhīm bought Hājar and her son Ismāʿīl while she was suckling him, and placed them near the Kaʿbah under a tree. He left them with a bag of dates and skin of water. Hājar said to him, to whom are you leaving us? He replied, to Allah. When the water ran out, she placed her son down and ran between Safa and Marwa 7 times. Then the angel struck the ground with his heel, and Zamzam sprang forth. Hājar began to scoop the water with her hand. The Prophet said, may Allah have mercy on the mother of Ismāʿīl. Had she left the water, Zamzam would have been a flowing stream. So this is Mecca today. So just whitewash it. Take away all of the buildings. And it's just a harsh landscape. And Ibrāhīm decides to plunk his wife and child down in the middle of this desolate land, and he actually walks away without telling her anything. Imagine that. Imagine that. You just put your wife down and you turn around and you just walk away. But this is what the test was. This is an old I don't know what this is. This is the Kaaba, and around the Kaaba are certain landmarks. To here, yeah, to this place and this place and this place and right. So from the progeny of Abraham, we had some specific families, and we had some other families that were already living there. So who were they? So we have Al-Arab al-Ba'ida, Al-Arab al-Ariba, and Al-Arab al-Musta'riba. So Al-Arab al-Ba'ida are the original Arabs that are also known as perished Arabs, Arabs that no longer exist. The people of Ad, we studied them. The people of Thamud, we studied them. Al-Amalik, Tasam, Jadis, and Jurham. Right? Al-Amalik, the Jews called the Arabs Al-Amalik, and there are some understandings amongst Arabs too that the Amalik were giants, because in Arabic, Amalik means giant. Right? I don't believe they were giants. Who these were, Tasam, Jadis, Jurham, they're mentioned by Tabari, but we don't know anything about them. We know Ad and Thamud because the Quran mentions them, and the Arabs of pre-Islamic Arabia knew them. That's why Allah mentioned them. But the others, there's no mention in the Quran, but there are mentions of them. The Arabs knew about them. They are perished. They are gone. They were original Arabs, disappeared, gone. Then we have Al-Arab al-Ariba. These are the descendants from the line of Ya'rub ibn Yashrub ibn Qahtan. So people will always say to you, even educated people, in keeping in line with the traditional narrative, that Ya'rub was the founder, the first person to speak Arabic. That's why we have Arab after him. So he was the first Arab. He spoke Arabic, and credible people will just say it in passing, right? They're not giving it much thought. Sometimes, even if I believe they do give it a thought, they just say it just to keep in line with the books, right? But this is critical seerah, so we're going to criticize that. I don't believe for 1 second that Ya'rub woke up one day speaking a different language from everybody else, right? But Ya'rub did exist, but he didn't speak Arabic language. We saw the development of the Arabic language. It just doesn't work like that, the way the accounts say it. From them we have the Qahtani Arabs, who are the southern Arabs. And I put this in underneath, not Saba, Himyar. Let me just edit that, there's a mistake here. So it's not Saba, it's not Himyar, it's not Ma'an, it's not Qataban, right? So for anybody who believes that the southern Arabs are the Yemenites of old, no, it's not. They are the pure Arabs. Again, I put a question mark there. What does it mean to be a pure Arab, by the way? Yeah, just because these demarcations are in the history books, right? It doesn't mean that we just accept everything without criticism, right? And there's no harm in politely criticizing and trying to get better understandings of what we're trying to study here. We're not rubbishing anybody's work. We're not being disrespectful. We're just saying we're historians. This sounds a bit fishy. What do you mean by it? They were the pure Arabs. Right? Even the pure Arabs had their blood mixed with other people. Nobody is really pure. Nobody on earth is really pure. Right? So what do they mean by pure Arabs? But let's go with this one. Let's go with this. Al-Arab al-Ariba are the pure Arabs, the desert Arabs. Then we have the Musta'riba. These are the descendants of Ismāʿīl alayhi salam. Their 20th generation, from Rasul going up, it's number 20 is Adnan. And they are the Arabized Arabs. Musta'riba means Arabized. So for example, Syria is Arabized. Right? Iraq is Arabized. Yemen is Arabized, and that's why they call Arabs today. Otherwise, from their blood, most of Syria is not Arab. Yemen is not Arab. Iraq is not Arab. We went through this in early lectures. So Adnan is the 20th ancestor of Rasulullah. He says, You will see family trees of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam going all the way back to Adam alayhi salam. Those trees are not authentic. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the genealogists, they make mistakes after Adnan. So up till Adnan, you should try to memorize as homework. Maybe I should give you an exam on this, to memorize the names of all of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam's ancestors and to know that it stops at Adnan. Beyond that, we don't know. We can speculate, but we don't know for sure. I'm just going to take a side detour on this. I was supposed to do some more research on this, but I think I will leave it here. Okay, cool. Let's just quickly have a look at this and then we'll end it. So the Hajj. So we'll touch upon Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam's family tree more, but let's just sidetrack for a while, because Ibrāhīm alayhi salam built the Kaʿbah. What was the purpose of the Kaʿbah? The Hajj. So what do we know about the Hajj? Exactly what you and I know about the Hajj today. From the past it was the same, but there was some some big differences, right? There were some big differences between what we know as Hajj today and what they did in the past. First of all, Hajj is a pious display today. Hajj is a pious display. Hajj in the past wasn't always a pious display. In the Hajj, our mother bore us. So the poorer people or the less noble people would dance around the Kaaba, starkers, completely naked. So you got a 50-year-old woman who's dancing around the Kaaba completely naked. This was the Hajj in pre-Islamic times. And she would say, and there's a poem in Ibn Hisham's Seerah where she says something about, yes, I know I'm naked, but I'm only in the condition my mother bore me, or something like that, right? So the buying of cloth only from Quraysh. So why did this happen? It's because the Quraysh monopolized it. You had to buy the ihram from them. They were the curators, the crafters, the makers, the weavers of this particular type of cloth that you had to wear. And if you couldn't afford it, then just dance around, prance around naked. They used to pour blood on the walls of the Kaaba. So what happens in the heat is it starts to stink. Worship was hand clapping and whistling and blowing horns. So whenever I see this, I swear to God, whenever I see this, the image that comes into my mind is Hare Krishna. If you live in London, have you seen the Hare Krishna boys in Oxford Street or Central London, people? Anybody?
Sorry, I wouldn't know.
Okay, you wouldn't know. Okay, I really want you to do a search on this. Type in Hare Krishna London, Oxford Street. Right? When you see them dudes, this is the image that I picture when I see these people doing tawaf around the Kaaba. So they would say, Labbaik, Allahumma Labbaik, here I am present, my Lord, I am present. But then they would say, no one is your partner except one who is permitted by you. So they would add this line, you are his master and the master of what he possesses. So this is the shirk that they would do, right? So they would add their deities, add their gods into this. And each tribe had its own labbaik. I have it somewhere on an academic paper, but I didn't have time to pull it out. Each tribe had its own talbiyah, basically, right? And I will try to pull it out and present it sometime, inshallah. But basically the crux of it is what they would say here. So there is no God but you, and no one is your partner except one who is permitted by you. You are his master and the master of what he possesses. Doing business or working for one's livelihood during the Hajj journey were considered unlawful. So there was no business, there was no livelihood. We know today that during Hajj and during Tawaf, during Hajj and during I'tikaf, you can conduct survival business, basically. So you can leave I'tikaf if it means that nobody's there to feed you and buy your goods and come back. And during Hajj, people shop, as you can see, right? But they wouldn't do this. They would make it harder. Others used to give up food and water during Hajj and regarding this abstention as part of worship, while others stopped talking from the beginning of Hajj till the end. How many of you were taught during I'tikaf not to utter one word and to just knock on the door, and your mom or somebody would open the door, your sister would open the door, and just you would kind of sign language speak, and they would give you some food, right? I'm sure you're all aware of what I'm talking about. That's not in the spirit of i'tikaf. It sounds more akin to jahali practice, right? In Islam, you can speak, it's fine. You can speak to people even in the masjid, even at home. You can have a conversation, it's cool. Right, so the pre-Islamic Hajj, direct references to the Hajj and Mecca appears in Al-Nabigha al-Dudyani's celebrated ode addressing the Lukhmid king An-Nu'man ibn al-Mundhir. So this is a quote from a pre-Islamic poet. I swear by the life of he whose Kaaba I have circled. So he's basically saying, Rabbul Kaaba, Rabbul Kaaba. I swear by the life of he whose Kaaba I have circled. And I swear by the thick blood poured upon the sacrifice stones, by the Lord preserver of the birds in his sanctum, touched by the riders to Mecca between the wells of Ghail and Asad. Now this is where pre-Islamic poetry comes into its own, right? So inside their poetry, you can see what they were doing, which we don't know anything about today, except that it's written in their poetry. So the pouring of blood. Now imagine we never had this poetry, right? Islamic sources haven't really preserved outside of poetry the details. Yes, you have some, like the dancing around naked, we have that, right? But these kind of things, it's the poetry that we have it from, right? So God bless those people that managed to save pre-Islamic Arabian poetry, because we're getting, like, I don't care about Imrul Qais's love affairs, and I don't care about praising kings that existed, kings that didn't exist, girls that existed, watering holes. That's like the bigger picture. I like looking at the details, and this is absolutely fascinating. For me, this is what Arabian poetry is all about, right? And of course the names of the kings, but it doesn't matter if you don't know the name of the kings, because Orientalists and Muslim scholars, we acknowledge the name of the kings. We know the names of these kings. So it's okay. But these details here are the most important. By pouring blood over sacrifice stones. Now, a few lessons ago, when we looked at pagan Arabia, I showed you stones from Jordan, right? These were stones that they would place idols over. I showed you Baitels, Bait El, house of Allah. Right, I showed you Baitels that were stones that they would erect, that were signifiers of deities, but without having a face or without having a form. So they would worship these. So he's basically saying, poured upon the sacrifice stones. So Orientalists use these verses to say, oh look, here is proof that your Kaaba was up north in Jordan, your Baitels were in Jordan, your sacrifices, everything was in Jordan. They use this as evidence, right? But for me as a Muslim, I'm just thinking, wow, right? Baitels, sacrificial stones, mentioned in the north, the epigraphic record proves it, and the poetry proves it. Allahu Akbar. As a historian, these are the ding moments where you just think, wow, it's all worth it. It's all worth whatever you did, because this is here. It's like just, So, by the Lord, preserver of the birds in his sanctum, touched by the riders to Mecca between the wells of Ghail and Ga'ad. So now, if we know the names of these wells, of these wells, we can then say to the Orientalists, what are you talking about? These wells are in Central Arabia, in the Hijaz region, and Mecca and Medina are there. But I suspect that we don't know where these wells are anymore, or they won't believe us even if we do. So we have Zuhair ibn Abi Sulma. He says, I swore by the house circumambulated by its builders, Quraysh and Jurham, and by Lat and Al-Uzza, whom they worship at Mecca, at the noble inviolable house Al-Bayt Al-Atiq Al-Mukarram. This is his poem. Then we have the poem of Zuhair. I swore solemnly by the campsites of Mina, by the shaven forelocks and lice-laden head. So he's swearing by the campsites, which we still do today, and we shave our heads, and he's mentioned lice-laden head. Most people in the past had lice in their head, right? So you young, nice, pretty girls, wherever you are in this world, in the past you all had lice in your head. Then on the right hand side, I swear by him in whose hand presince the Quraysh make pilgrimage. So like oaths are normally made on great things. Allah makes oaths on great things. So the Arabian Arabs, they're making oaths on the Kaaba because they recognize the greatness of the Hajj and of the Kaaba. So I swear by him to whose precincts the Quraysh make pilgrimage, and by the gatherings under Mount Hira, and by the holy month of Banu Umayyah, and soaking blood of bound animal sacrifices. This is Auf ibn al-Ahwas. And then the bottom left, I swear by the Lord of the prancing camels, Rabbal ar-Rakisat, towards Mina around Mecca, leading sacrifice animals. Pre-Islamic poetess Habiba bint Abdul Uzza. I swear by my camel and by every sacrificial animal, covered in dust, correlated at the narrows of Ma'zim, and driven by Al-Akhshab. Sa'idah ibn Ju'ayya. When I swear an oath by God's sanctum, it is no fault oath. By Ibn al-Zibara. When I swear an oath by God's sanctum, okay, I just repeated it there. Don't think we are just a bunch of Amars. I swear by God's sanctum, Baytullah, we're better than that. Rashid ibn Shahiba. Your aunties are of Qama'i stock. They do not sacrifice at Al-Mu'arraf. This is Hudail. What a sight to see them depart, more precipitous than departure from Al-Muhassab, Firaq al-Muhassab. Two groups, one to the plains of Nakhla, the other upland to Mount Kaʿbah. Imrul Qais. Oh my God, this is... Okay, it's cool. Let's enjoy the poetry. O Lord, Lord of the high heavens, Lord of the pilgrims, Rabb Hajj, who gather from the villages, Usama ibn al-Harith. I swear by my cloak, by the monk at Al-Lujji, and by the edifice of Qusay and Al-Madud ibn Jurham, Al-Asha, Maymun ibn Qais. By the end of he to whom the Quraysh make the Hajj, Al-Asha. I swear by the Lord of the prancing camels towards Mina, crossing crag after mounting crag. You are not to be found at Al-Hajun, nor As-Safa, Ahl al-Hujun, wala As-Safa, nor have right to drink from Zamzam, Al-Ash'a. So this is some poetry. I'm not going to go too much into more details of what the Hajj was like, but just some things to take into account to show you the differences. The time arrived for granting the dua of the Prophet Ibrāhīm, which he had invoked while raising the walls of the Kaaba. O Lord, rise up in my midst a messenger from amongst them who will recite to them your revelations and instruct them in the scripture and in wisdom, and who will reform their morals. Consequently, a man arose from the progeny of Ibrāhīm whose name was to be Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. After Islam, all deviant practices in the Kaaba, in and around the holy sanctuary, were stopped. All the idols were smashed, all invented rituals wiped out. Competition amongst the poets was stopped. Instead, Allah told them, and when you have completed your rites of Hajj, then remember Allah as you used to remember your fathers, nay, with a more vigorous remembrance. You know, the Quraysh would sit down and start talking about their great ancestors and their great deeds and write poetry. Allah says, remember Allah like you remember them, nay, even more. Do you remember I told you that this is the way Allah speaks? And when Allah spoke to Abraham in the Bible, Allah spoke in a similar way, which is making me think maybe that's Allah really speaking in the Bible there. Because Allah does this again and again. Allah said, eat and drink, but do not be excessive. So this is Allah's, they wouldn't do this. So Allah says, eat and drink, but do not be excessive. Verily, He does not love the wasteful. The practice of spattering the blood of the sacrificial animals on the walls of the Kaaba and throwing off their flesh there was also stopped. Allah informed them that their flesh and their blood does not reach Allah, but it is the devotion from you that reaches Him. We know this, that when you sacrifice an animal, it's your ibadah, it's you taking the means, it's the action that you do, it's beneficial for you, it's not beneficial for Allah. It doesn't reach Allah as the Aztecs and the Incas and all these people think that we will human sacrifice and stave off anger. It doesn't work that way. It's the act that Allah enjoys from you. Circling the Kaaba in a state of nudity was strictly prohibited by the Prophet ﷺ on Allah's command. And Allah further explained, say, who has forbidden the adornment dress given by Allah which He has brought forth for His servants? It was formerly considered an act of piety not to trade during Hajj because it was regarded as being unlawful in this condition to utilize sources of livelihood. This concept was also rejected by Allah, who said, it is no sin for you that you seek the bounty of your Lord by trading. It was also prohibited to start for Hajj without taking provisions. And Allah said, you must take provisions for the journey, because not to take provisions for a journey in the world does not mean taking provisions in the hereafter. The best provision for the hereafter is piety. Okay, so non-Arab late antiquity texts mention pilgrimage fairs on the fringes of Arabia and the Fertile Crescent. Further evidence, these pilgrimage fairs are many different pilgrimages, by the way. Further evidence for pilgrimages pre-Islamic Arabia is set out in Dost paper in a collection revealing that the term Hajj has precedent in biblical Hag. So they call it Hag, right? You'll find the Passover festival, the Jews call Hag. A festival. Hag is a festival, a carnival, a festival, entailing a pilgrimage and an appearance before God. And in North Arabian inscriptions, and while Dost notes that South Arabian primarily used a different term to describe their pilgrimage, the Hajj is also present. There were accordingly a variety of shrines to which the Hajj could refer. And to this point, the pre-Islamic Arabic poems in which the term Hijaj appears as connoting years. So Hajj and Hijaj. Hijaj is basically, Hajj means year, Hijaj means years. Because they would make a calendar like this. Do not expressively specify visitation to Mecca. Likewise, one case of Mu'tamir in pre-Islamic poetry definitely refers to a different pilgrimage center at Dhul Khalasa. This we mentioned in the book on idols by Ibn Kalbi. On the other hand, the poet who most frequently invokes the Hijaj years metaphor in pre-Islamic is Zuhair ibn Abi Sulma, and he resided in Mecca in the generation before Islam. Hence, while the Hijaj years metaphor may not have exclusively referenced Meccan pilgrimage, there are good grounds to consider that some poets likely intended Mecca. Overall, the terminology identifies a presence of annual pilgrimage in Arabian society at a sufficiently hallowed level to serve as a means of reckoning time. So back then, we didn't have the lunar calendar. We didn't have a calendar. So how would people mark years? By Hajj, right? So they would, I went last Hajj. Okay, when did you last go and see your father? I saw my father last Hajj. How many Hajjaj ago did you see your father? I saw my father 5 Hujjaj ago. Do you understand what I'm saying? So they use the word Hajj to denote years. So now we're going to go on to the illustrious lineage. That's not how you spell lineage, but I leave it for now. Right, so we shall now, I think we should leave it for here, and inshallah next week we shall carry on. We went on for 1 hour and 45 minutes. I think that's good for everybody, correct?
Yes, good.
Yeah, Nasser's happy.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, any questions?
Is it out that paper you said you want, you can share? Can you share that?
Can I share, what's that?
This paper and the gardens.
Ah, okay, yeah, the archetype with the primordial Heidi. Okay, I'll share it with you, but the editing might be off because I wrote it in one draft and I don't think I actually edited it. I want to edit it, but I will send it to you unedited, right?
That's fine.
It's a fascinating read. It's basically the purification of the soul using the archetype of the primordial hilo. So the primordial hilo is the base material that the Greeks say has always existed. So the Hindus, the Taoists, the Hindus, and these kind of and Greek philosophy believe that the primordial matter, material matter in Arabic, has always existed. I don't believe it's always existed, but I use the same word, primordial hilo. But what I really was trying to mean there is the base material. So basically using the base material of the earth to transform your life. So we take lessons from creation, because all of creation is pointing towards a God. It sounds a bit paradoxical, and it is a bit paradoxical, because I ended up using the word primordial high-low without understanding the true context of primordial high-low back then. But I can easily explain it away now and say, forget the word primordial, just take the word high-low and use high-low to transform your soul. And I give examples, many examples on how to do it. And I wrote a story at the same time about a bird and about a man who finds a bird. Both these stories came about as a result of a spiritual hal. So both stories should be read together, because it gives you an idea of what my spiritual state was back then. Now I'm just a lost cause, I'm just completely lost. I don't even know what spirit means. But back then, I believe when I smelt a rose, I achieved Buddha-like enlightenment. Honey joking, right? So I will find it, inshallah, and send it to you. I'll post it on the group. Cool, inshallah. I have it anyway. I can find it somewhere. So any other questions, anybody?
No, nothing comes to mind.
Nothing comes. Yes, ask the question. I like it when, by the way, I like it. I want at least one question. I don't really like it when people don't have a question. I want you to make one up. So ask the questions. Aisha, what's your question?
You know from before how you mentioned about the grave, how there was a bench and it was decorated with flowers. All my life, like, I've been hearing how it's heavily emphasized that one should not, like, it's not allowed to decorate the grave. And Islam says that. So what's the basis for that, and what do we say regarding that?
Right, so there's so there's two theories here. One theory is that there's the extreme Wahhabi understanding of it, and then there's the rest of the world. And you lot studied in the Deobandi madrasa, and the Deobandis stride both the Sunni school and the Wahhabi school. Depending on which mullah you studied under, you're either going to be more close to Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, or you're going to be more close to the Wahhabis. So you are absolutely allowed to put a covering over a grave. You are absolutely allowed to put benches around there. You're absolutely allowed to even have a prayer area on the side. But the only difference is that the prayer area needs to be away from the grave, right? You are the evidences I'll give you. I'll find them for you. I'll give them to you. And the shade is made as an open shade. I videoed it. I'll send you the video. It's stunning. It's an open shade that's covering. So it's like, like you get a garage where people want to protect their cars from the heat, and they just put up a canopy, 4 beams and a plastic canopy. But this was wooden canopy, and it's beautiful, right? So it's just a nice area. Look, you want to sit by your family and read Surah Yasin. Where will you sit? If you're it's a 50-degree temperature. Bukhara was 43 degrees. That's Saudi Arabia temperature, right? And if you want to visit your ancestors and you want to sit by their grave and you want to read Surah Al-Fatiha for them, you want to spend some time contemplating them, how are you going to do that if it's a dust bowl? I saw graveyards in Saudi Arabia and they were dust bowls. I'm not talking about Mecca, Medina, the graveyard of Medina. I'm talking about the cities I lived in. I saw graveyards. There were dust bowls. Nobody goes. You want people to come to your grave and pray for you. You want them to change your grave and put greenery there, because we have the hadith of Rasulullah that whoever puts greenery on the grave, for as long as those shoots stay green, Allah alleviates the punishment of the grave for them. Rasulullah passed by a grave where 2 people were being punished, and he said they're not being punished for something great. The first person just was lackluster in purification. He didn't care about urine drops. This is for men. We mentioned this earlier on in one of the other lectures on Imam Ghazali, how men have problems with this. So he just didn't care. It was a tiny thing, right? It's a tiny thing. But Allah's punishing him. So Rasulullah took 2 sticks, 2 stalks of whatever, and planted them there. He said, as long as these stay green, their punishment shall be alleviated or stopped. So you're supposed to regularly go to your grave and plant over your grave grass and flowers. In Saudi Arabia, I never saw them do that. But how will you do that if it's 43 degrees and you're planting and you're cleaning the grave? You're planting this dusty grave and you're cleaning it. Sometimes you got to patch up the mud again, and you just want to get out of there. You're thinking, Mum, I love you, but goodbye, Mum. Right? How's Mum feeling? Mum wants you there by her side. And let's not get into the Wahhabi polemics of, oh no, she doesn't know and all that. You know, I don't believe all that. They know you're there because you say salam to them and they respond, right? And sit there with your mother for a little while. Read Surah Yasin. It gives them comfort. Read stuff and bless them. Give them the reward. Allah listens to that. Clean their grave. Plant their grave. We're allowed to even put a cloth on their grave. The ulama say that you can put a cloth on a grave as identification between the ulama class and the normal people. So how are you going to do that if it's very, very hot? So you plant a canopy on top, which allows you to sit there for an hour. And then you can put a bench there to make it more easier. And then now all of a sudden, because there's an area, there's a bench and a canopy, and it's a bit far from the actual grave, why not just plant the whole area into greenery, and you've made an oasis where people will come and want to sit and do Fatiha. One of the problems we have with graveyards in the West is they say that who will pass your grave and pray for you? Who will pass? Nobody will pass. And in 100 years' time, they're going to level the ground and a pub's going to spring up. And you're going to hear disco dancing above your grave. The latest 22nd century pop music or whatever it may be. Right? But in Arab Muslim graveyards, you're always going to get people passing you and praying for you. And if the graveyard is not kept properly, they're going to pass by without praying for you. If the graveyard is kept properly, you are going to go into that graveyard and sit as your leisure time. And if you've got any Islamic sense into you, Rasulullah said, go and visit the graves where they remind you of death. And you're going to sit there and remember death and ponder death and pray for your loved ones. So I know what you're saying. I know where you're coming from. I'll send you the evidences, inshallah. Sometimes the Deobandis can be a bit extreme in these things. Any other question?
Yeah, that's fine. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Hope you enjoyed today's lesson. Inshallah, next week we'll carry on. Next week is my last week. Next weekend. After that, I shall be traveling for 3 months. My work finishes. I'm going to go back to England. So hopefully I should teach you from England, inshallah. Lessons will be short from now on, okay? So inshallah we won't have stressful stuff and people who miss it can carry on. So thank you very much.
So next week we'll have one lesson, and after that we'll say for 3 months.
No, you'll have lessons wherever I am in the world, right?
Yeah.
You know, if I end up in a graveyard, I'll find the Uzbek grave where there's a bench. And I'll give you a lesson from there, inshallah.
Okay, that's fine.
All right. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much. May Allah reward us with this and next time. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala آله عدد كمال الله وكما يليق بكماله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على أسعد محمد وعلى آله عدد كمال الله وكما يليق بكماله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نور الهدى محمد وعلى عدد كمال الله وكما يليق بكماله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم